Python is an amazing language. It's great for automating things. It's the boss of all programming languages when it comes to machine learning, data science, and AI stuff. Wouldn't it be great if you could turn your Python programs into Android apps? That is what we will learn in this video. What you are seeing right now is Google's official Android development course. And in this course, they use the Kotlin programming language or the Java programming language. And the first app that they make you create using Kotlin and XML is this one. By creating this app, you learn all the basics of creating an Android app. You learn how to add an app bar, add UI components like images and buttons, and organize them or position them on the screen. And then you learn how to add functionality so that when you press this button, it transforms the image. So we are going to recreate this same application in Python using the Kivy and KivyMD libraries. So let's head over to PyCharm. The first step before we start coding is to install the necessary libraries, which are Kivy and KivyMD. So if you are using PyCharm, things get a lot easier. Down here there's a Python packages section. If you click on that, you can search for Kivy or KivyMD and install it directly from here. If you're not using PyCharm, then you can go to command prompt and you can use the commands python-m pip install Kivy. Once Kivy is installed, then you have to install another library, KivyMD, which is for material design. Python-m pip install KivyMD. Once both Kivy and KivyMD packages are installed, then we can start coding. I will create a new Python file and name it dice roller. And now I'm going to write some code. The code that I have written right now is called Boilerplate Code. Boilerplate Code is a code which is reused a lot of times. If you are using Java or Kotlin in Android Studio to create Android apps, then there's a bunch of boilerplate code already present even before you start coding. Every time you create an Android app using Python, you will start with this code or code similar to this. Let me explain a little bit how it works. First, we made some imports. We imported MD app from Kivy.app. We imported screen from Kivy.ux.screenManager, and then we imported builder. These are some of the functions that we are going to use in our application. We define a string variable Kivy, which starts with 3 quotation marks and ends with 3 quotation marks. Within this quotation marks, we are going to create our UI or program our UI. We will see how. Then we have a class, main class. It makes use of the MD app that we imported earlier. Then we have an initialization function, which is equivalent of constructor in C++ or Java. It simply defines or declares a KVS variable, which loads a string Kv. And then we have a build function, in which we create an object screen from the class screen which we imported. Now KVS loads string from this variable, and we are going to write the UI of our application in this variable. Screen.add widget, what it will do is it will add the UI to the screen. I will show you how. And then we create an object MA equals main app, and then we run it. Let's add some UI to it. Start editing your Kv variable. I will type MD screen, and then I will add a button. MD rectangle flat button. Let's try that. MD rectangle flat button is a component of KivyMD, and then I will add some text. Now let's run it. We can see in the bottom corner, we have our button. How do we position this button now? Now I will declare another property of this button, which is pos hint. So we are telling KivyMD how we are going to position our button. How do we do that? Within curly braces, I write center x 0.5 and center y also 0.5. Now if I run it, we can see it's in the center. If we modify this, for example, if we change the center y attribute of position hint to 0.3, then we will see that our button moves down, and if you change back to 0.5, it comes back to the center. MD rectangle flat button is just one of the many components that the KivyMD library provides us. If you go to Google and search for KivyMD documentation, if we go to the KivyMD documentation, in the component section, we can see a lot of components listed out. There's buttons, layout, cards. So if you go to button, we can see the different kinds of buttons that KivyMD provides us. There's MD flat button, MD rectangle flat button, and it also tells how to apply these components or how to add these components to our program. How do we do that? You can search for that in the documentation. I will just use the Control F command and then type bar and see what we get. We get toolbar. The app bar is called toolbar in KivyMD. So how do we add that? We add that by declaring an MD toolbar within our Kivy string file. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to add an MD toolbar. I will give it a title. Let's say dice roller, and then let's run it and see what happens. We have an app bar or a toolbar, but it is in the bottom. So how do we position it correctly? Well, that's easy. Now I'm going to define something called a layout. I'm going to define an anchor layout, and I'm going to keep our toolbar within this or under this anchor layout. There are different kinds of layouts in KivyMD. There's grid layout, which organizes or lays out our components in grids, or there's a box layout, which organizes our components components in boxes. And there's AnchorLayout, which organizes or positions or lays out our components in edges of the screen. I will now change or define properties of AnchorLayout. I will type anchor center and anchor Y top. Now let's run and see what happens. So we have successfully positioned our app bar on the top of the screen. So now I hope that you are getting some intuition of how UI is created using KivyMD and the Kivy language. This is the Kivy language, by the way. If you have done some CSS, then this would kind of be familiar to you. You'll grasp it easily. Now our purpose in this tutorial is to recreate this application. We need these images, all these images. So I will create a new folder and name it asset. The link is in the description for the images that you have to add in this program. Download these images and then I will move all these images to our assets folder. Then all the images have been moved in the assets folder. Now let's try and add an image. So just above the MD rectangle flat button, I'm going to add an image. To add an image, let's type image and then its source. Source is a property of image. I will set the value of the source as asset/dice1.png since we kept our images in the assets folder. Now let's see how it looks. There's a big image in the middle of the screen. How do we change its size? To change its size, we will use another property or attribute, which is the size hint. Size hint Y to be 0.4 and size hint X to be 0.4 as well. Now if I run it, the size of our image is smaller, but it is not positioned correctly. How do we position it? We can copy this pause hint code here and see if it works. And the position of our image and our button are the same, so they are overlapping. So to prevent that from happening, let's change the position of our image a little bit. So I will write 0.3 instead of 0.5. And now the position is changed, but it's still kind of overlapping, but it won't overlap a new phone. As we can see, if we change the screen size, it works fine. Right? Now I will change the type of the button that we are using. Instead of MD rectangle flat button, I will use an MD raised button. I will also change the text to role instead of testing. Okay. We have our button, we have our image. Now it's time to add some functionality. How do we do that? The first thing is we have to give our components identities. How do we do that? We will type ID die state. Now giving an ID to our components is very useful. You will see how. How do we code our program such that when you click the button, it changes the image or it changes the source of the image? How do we do that? For that, we will need to create a function. I will also give an ID to our button and the ID will be, let's call it role button. How do we define what it should do when it is pressed, when this button is pressed? For that I will type on release app.play. What is app.play? It is a function that we have not defined yet. We have not created app.play yet, but we have to create it in a second. On release basically means when you press the button and release it, then our application will execute this play function that we are going to create. Let's create a function. So now I'm going to define play within our main app class. Now what should this function do? When the button is pressed, it will change the image. How do we change the image? Okay, type this self.kvs.ids.dice_state because we named it dice state, right? So we are making a call to it or a callback to it. Dice state dot source equals asset/dice6.png. You can reformat it so that the green underline is gone. So now when I run the app and press roll, it changes the image, right? But we don't want to just change it to one image. We want it to change the dice image into a random number, right? To do that, we will import the good old random library from Python, import random. I will define a variable dice space, okay? And I will use the random function, random.choice. And within these parentheses, I will add a list, dice1.png, dice2.png, dice6.png, and now I will define another variable, file name, which equals assets / in quotation marks obviously plus dice face. So this becomes the address of our image. So this random function is going to randomly choose between these dice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the file name variable just adds assets / to it, dice face, so that it becomes the address of our image, and then we add it to the source of our image component. So I will write file name here. Now when I run the app, roll it, we can see it's working, but this is still in .py format. If you want to learn how to turn this .py into .apk, an installable application, then you must check out the next video in which I will tell you how to convert this Python file into .apk, Android application. Thank you so much for watching.